Thank you, Spocko. Thank you, McCoy. Yes, I just wish that Spock could have replaced Clinton for the feel your pain thing, because then he would have actually been able to do the mind meld with us. It's time to bring him in. Let's do that right now. He is Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. Eric, live long and prosper. How are you,
my friend? I'm working on it. I haven't quite got there yet.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Hey, do you ever, in fact, I'm experiencing a little bit of that Irish thing where the hands start to like curl in on themselves and people do like a surgery thing and they get it fixed up. You ever experienced anything like that?
I've had cramps, but no, nothing like that.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called. I can't remember what the name of it is, but evidently there's like a therapy for it now, and it's a great breakthrough. I don't know how many years they've been doing it, but like people who couldn't play the piano because their hands had started all curl up, and it's something that Irish people get a lot. I don't know why, but there you go. Yeah, but maybe I can pretend, sort of like the way Netanyahu pretends that he's derived from some sort of Semitic peoples when he comes from Eastern Europe.
Well, meanwhile, have you been stocking up on toilet paper? Here we are again, right? Remember when we had to do that back in 2020?
Oh, great point. Great point. Oh, man. Oh, man. Geez, that's a really good point. You know what? Here's what we can do. Maybe if you and I can get into the supermarket at night, we can put some arrows down and direct everybody away from the shelves that actually have the toilet paper. Then we'll go in, we'll take all the toilet paper. Sound good?
That might work.
All right.
I actually saw something. This is totally unrelated to probably what we want to talk about, but I think this was in San Francisco where they had a mask mandate reenactment night in some venue. Did you see the news story about this?
No.
So essentially they just tried to recapture the moment. Like they had some venue in San Francisco where people had to wear masks. It was voluntary, but people who were neurotic about catching cold could feel safe and secure again in their safe space with everybody wearing masks. And the really appalling thing was it wasn't just adults. I saw people bringing their kids into that event. Yeah.
What a bunch of masochists. What in the world?
Well, neurotics, that's the thing. Like people have been conditioned to just live in fear of everything, including, oh my gosh, we might catch a cold, And I mean, I admit to having some hypochondriac tendencies myself, but, I counterbalance that with the rational part of my brain that realizes, calm down. If you catch a cold, it's just a cold. You're not going to die.
Right.
So, be reasonable about it. I remember listening to Howie Mandel, the comedian.
Sure. I know he has a phobia of germs and things, I think.
Yeah. And during the initial stages of COVID, he actually was very thoughtful about it and said, I've been living with this for most of my life, like the neurosis he meant, and how awful it is to have this mental problem where you're afraid to shake somebody's hand, where you have to put your shirt over the knob, before you try to open the door and stuff like that. And how awful it is to have to live that way, but that's what they did to us. Anyway, I won't go off onto one of my COVID rants. I know we've got other fish to fry tonight.
Well, inside the news notes, I noted some of the big stuff that's out there over at your website. And one of the things that I really wanted people to see, I said, Eric Peters on self-ownership. I wrote it here. I said, not only does the World Economic Forum want you to own nothing, that also is the modus operandi of all statism. In fact, and you spell it out very clearly in this piece, and you have even more new pieces that have gone out since, but you spell it out. You can't even own yourself, as I noted. How can we be free when we're not free to own? And this is, I think and I mentioned at the opening, Eric, it's a great distillation and combination of breaking news stories that allow you to derive from it a philosophical principle that regardless of what the circumstances are, people can understand. The state steals your ability to say that you own yourself. They make you not only their slave, but they literally don't allow you to claim self-ownership. And I think that's really important. Tell us about this. It's called How Can We Be Free When We're Not Free to Own?
Yeah, well, one of the facets of it that's most interesting to me and that I thought was worth exploring in the piece was that if you compare our condition to, say, the slaves that had to exist in the antebellum South, they had the comfort of knowing they were slaves. They were well aware of their condition. They were under no illusions that they were free men. They knew they were owned. They knew that they owned nothing, not even themselves, because they had to work for massa. That, whatever they created was some property of somebody else. The hut that they lived in was owned by the massa, right? So there was some comfort in that, at least, or some mental clarity, some sanity. Right. It instilled in them a desire to be free.
There's a realism behind it. They know what they're facing.
Yes. Now, what's happened to us is really quite ingenious. They allow us the illusion of ownership. For example, you hear people talk of being homeowners. Well, as the church lady used to say on Saturday Night Live, isn't that special? How can you be the owner of something when you will never have to stop making payments on that something to the state in order to avoid being evicted from what obviously is not your property?
Right.
I paid for my house 20 years ago, in the sense that I paid off the mortgage. So, nonetheless, every 6 months I get these strange notes from the government saying that somehow I owe them money. Right. For things I didn't contract for, that I don't use, that I don't approve of. Right. Nonetheless, if I don't pay these sums of money, what will happen? Well, the sheriffs will come and they will drag me out of my house. It's absurd. There's literally nothing that we're allowed to own or do, for that matter. Think about the effrontery of even a basic and intimate thing like getting married. It's no longer a contract between two people. The state is involved. You have to get the state's permission. Just like, if a slave on the plantation, he wanted to marry, one of the other slaves, he could only do it if massa said okay. Well,
absolutely.
Us.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously they put God before the church. A marriage was supposed to be something that happened in front of your friends and in front of God. And then they started to license marriages. As we know, George and Martha Washington never had to get a permission slip from the government. And you have to get a permission slip to actually claim that you own a piece of land. And you have to keep getting permission over and over and over and over again. And you even noted in your piece, we're talking about conscription. You've got register for the selective service, of course. Very important.
That's probably the most blatant and in-your-face example of who owns who. They're literally claiming your body, saying that you owe your corpus to the state, which may, use it and use it to, send it overseas to fight and die for whatever the state says you are obliged somehow to fight and die for. It's absolute madness. And
I would say also, Eric, in a translational way, again, to reiterate your point, whether it's claiming your body and your time to go fight and possibly die, or rather than conscription, knowing that you've been conscripted into the state system, whether they ship you to another country or not, in the end, if you resist, they will point government guns at you.
Yep. And notice the etymology of it too. They call it service.
Oh.
Because again, it's all about this warping of people's perceptions. And that's why they use the language that they use. They don't call it something honest. Conscription, which is what it is.
Yeah.
Because people might actually get to thinking about what that means. So they use the word service, which is almost like it's ennobling, sort of, you're doing something to serve your fellow man. No, you're serving the state.
And let's say this as well too. While we're talking about conscription in the military, Eric, when nowadays without literal conscription occurring to pull people into the military, we have a voluntary military for most of the people who are there right now. Unless somebody was conscripted in Vietnam and somehow they're still in the military. 99.99% of the people in the military volunteered to go into the military, or they volunteered because maybe they were going to be going to prison and they were given an option to go into the military instead, or something like that. Most everybody, they made a choice. So when people get on the radio and they call into a talk radio show and the hosts fatuously say, "Thank you for your service," when they say, "I was a veteran of such and such, such and such." First of all, you're not a veteran of any war because they never declared war constitutionally. So let's just wipe that off the table, okay? Second, how about who's actually serving whom? If these people volunteered to go in, they're not serving me, I'm serving them.
Yeah.
They volunteered to join the coercive force that's demanding I pay them. That's the way it's going. They have joined the mafia. They have gotten a gun from the mob lord, and that gun was bought off of my money at my corner store. That's what it is.
You're
And there's no
absolutely right.
denying this,
You're
because
absolutely right. It's an economic inducement, particularly
exactly.
they draw from people who tend to be from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who don't have a lot of opportunities. So they dangle all these things in front of them. You're going to get free this, free that, room and board. You're going to get educated. You're going to get skills. All these, and I understand the motivation, but your point is correct. We are being made to serve that. Somehow that becomes our obligation to provide all of these things for these people. And it's compounded by, well, I don't want my money being put toward killing people I don't even know in some other country somewhere who've done nothing to me. I don't want to be complicit in that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Absolutely. I was just thinking, Eric, I was thinking, did you see the video from the Israelis dragging that donkey behind their vehicle?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and a friend of mine texted that to me, and I saw it over the past few days, and I didn't show it on the show because it just is so bad. It's just so bad to think about. It gets me so upset. And what gets me is, in both real world and philosophical ways, there are so many translations that occur that if some person claims that you and I are engaging in slewing invective, we got a friggin' right to speak with invective, because what they're doing is, we are their mules. We are their donkeys. And it gets to the point now where they're literally making us the mules to give money to people to drag donkeys behind their vehicles and kill them. That's the service animals we are now.
Right.
If that doesn't tell people, that we have been reduced to a non-human state by the state, I don't know what does.
Well, and this passes without consequence. We're so numb to it. I'm just barely old enough to remember the My Lai massacre, during the Vietnam era, where the country was revolted and shocked when the news came out that an American soldier had apparently rounded up villagers in Vietnam and just summarily executed these people. And, there was a trial, and Cali was imprisoned, and all of this. Now, almost every day, we see similar things going on over there, and there are absolutely no repercussions, even to the extent of, hey, maybe we should stop sending them money. How about that? You've got this insolent, horrible individual, Netanyahu, characterizing the Iranians as savages. That's what he said the other day. We can't talk to them. They're savages, he said.
Right.
Really? Who's dragging donkeys through torturing animals, and who's doing all of these other, and that's not an isolated incident either. There's a lot of that stuff going on, and let's not even get into the wholesale dislocation of populations and mass murder that's going on over there.
Unbelievable. And let's mix a little bit of that. One facet of that, Eric. Eric Peters is our guest, everybody. Please open up a new tab. Go to ericpetersautos.com. Follow Eric as Apostate27832 on X. Eric, one of the things I want to mix here is one more facet of that foreign information coming from the Middle East and the genocide state, the occupation state, mixed in with what people are seeing coming in the United States on the domestic front, which is, it's the typical gamesmanship, horse race, which party is going to win sort of thing. But beneath it, people are starting to pay attention to a few things. So I want to show you this. Let's see. I've got over here what people are looking at coming up this fall if the Democrats take over Capitol Hill. So I'm going to show you this over on my news notes over at my Substack. I said, influence, Israel. Israel influence in the U.S. will continue if the Dems take the House and Senate in November. So here's Drop Site, and Glenn Greenwald is talking about this. This is something that's sort of vibrating out there because they're starting to see how the Democrats are positioning certain committees so that these committees, which will be assigned oversight, can be filled basically with AIPAC donated people. So to phrase it rather clunkily, a new policy, this is an organization, The organization A New Policy says Democrats are positioning an Israeli ally to block congressional scrutiny. A New Policy, a nonprofit lobbying and political organization founded by former Biden administration officials Josh Paul and Tariq Habash after they resigned over U.S. policy toward Gaza, criticized Tuesday's appointment of Jared Moskowitz. Now, I don't know if you've seen footage of this guy, Jared Moskowitz.
I have.
Wow, man. Walking the halls over to the Rayburn building in the little tunnel, that sort of stuff. Just disgusting. Absolute genocide denier. It's just disgusting. He will be the top Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs, Middle East, and North Africa subcommittee. This is what they're setting up. If Democrats retake the House, Moskowitz, and he's not alone, would be positioned to lead the subcommittee responsible for scrutinizing U.S. policy toward Israel and its actions across the region. Combine that with the NDAA stuff, Section 219. Then we've got this, quote, selecting one of Israel's biggest cheerleaders to run the relevant committee is a deliberate move to shut down that avenue. Okay, now there's a little bit more here. So let me just show you some of this stuff. Jared Moskowitz, I'm honored to be named ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee. At a moment of enormous change across the region, I'll work to strengthen America's relationship with Israel. How much stronger does it have to be in the face of the partner committing genocide?
Well, it just shows that nothing will change regardless of the outcome of the election because the same party's in charge, the compromised party. I saw an interview, or actually, interview isn't quite right. Somebody accosted Fetterman, and not in like a belligerent way, really, but just said, essentially, is there anything that you would, anything that would cause you to walk back any of your support of the state of Israel, anything at all? And he was unwilling to say or come up with a single thing that would cause him to say, wait a minute, that's a bridge too far. I can't support that.
Wow.
The ownership that the lobby, the billionaires' interests have over the government now at this point is so strikingly obvious and so alarming. We are not, we talk about all this business of our democracy and representation. How is it that we're represented by people who represent a foreign country over the people of this country? And it's just a fact. It's the truth.
It's like they're blowing a jet engine of insults at us.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable. And Eric, the other thing that gets me is, and I want to do this. I'm going to go back to the Marco Rubio stuff before you go, and some of this nonsense from the terrorist stuff to close that off too. But I also want to mention in your article on rights, natural rights, you said we have a right of self-ownership. That is the fundamental right that must be recovered. Self-ownership. Without it, we own nothing that cannot, in principle, be taken away in whole or part. And that's why I'm an anarchist, because the state always reserves that power. Yep. Rights are either inalienable, to use a word not much used in our time, or they're not really rights, are they? It took a long time to alienate our rights from us. It was done gradually, a little at a time, over a period of many lifetimes. We have been conditioned to regard them as privileges granted by the state, the massa less visible. And that is so well stated. And I know you phrased it a little bit earlier in a slightly different way, but you said our rights remain. They have merely been reasserted implacably.
Yep.
And I think that is just wonderfully stated. And Eric, as you know, I try to combine the philosophy with the breaking news and things like that, because, the breaking news figures can come and go, but the philosophy remains. The lessons remain for our humanity. And in the great test of time, that is what is so important. And, rocks get eroded and stones get broken and, dust is created out of our bones, but the principles stay. And you are defending those things right there. You did an amazing job with that article. My dad would be so happy to have read that. It was great.
Oh, thank you, Gard. Yeah, it arises out of my frustration over many decades in attempting to discuss these matters with conservatives, with Republicans, who seem to wonder why they always lose, or usually lose, when it comes to trying to stand athwart the left and the Democrats and all of that. And I pointed out to them, well, the problem is you don't take a principled stand on anything. It's always some utilitarian, well, let's have a little bit less of taxes,
Right.
or let's
Right.
mend, not end Obamacare, instead of simply forthrightly saying, look, nobody has the right to take anybody else's money, period,
Right.
for any reason. It doesn't matter that somebody has a need. The fact that you have a need, well, okay, you have a need. That doesn't entitle you to use violence or to have the state exercise violence against somebody else to help you with your need. Help should be freely given. It should be and really on like a really profound level, when help is coerced, it creates meanness. You have a genuine desire to help somebody because you want to. You see suffering, you see somebody who's had a bad turn of luck or something. And so, okay, I'm in a position to help this person. I'd like to do that. But then the state comes in, and not only does it take your money, which is affronterous enough, but you know perfectly well that people are being helped who really ought not to be helped. Moochers and parasites and rent seekers, corruption, all of that sort of thing. And it's obnoxious. It's right in your face. Like, we were talking about the property tax earlier. So, go to a high school now and look at what it's like. It's nicer than colleges used to be, and colleges now look like Fortune 500 headquarters. They have food with all the, fast food. Who do you think's paying for that? Why do you think the cost is so high? It's all because of this leverage, this coercion that's being used by the state to reward this group at the expense of that group. And that sort of thing has got to stop. And we've got to go back to this idea: you own you, I own me. If I use my brain or my body to create something, that's mine, period. And same for you. And we respect each other in that way. And certainly we can get together cooperatively and pool our resources for things that we consider to be worth doing. For example, a volunteer fire department. Hey, that's a fine idea. Let's get together and, we can, each of us maybe volunteer some of our time. We can chip in some money, to help buy the equipment. Nobody's coerced into it, but it's a good thing for the community to have some ability to put out fires. That's great. That's how things can and ought to work.
Yeah. And, I think on a primary and secondary level, Eric, that just your mentioning of worth is important. And then we get into the secondary level. So the primary level is the ethics of freedom, the ethics of freedom, of the primacy of the individual, the natural rights granted to us, and the fact that we are all equal and no one has a right to claim power over anybody else. The secondary aspect of that on a national level would be the Constitution. So we've got people who are willing to breach the first principle, which is peace and non-aggression. And they're willing to breach that. And then on the secondary level, within the constitutional framework, you have people who are willing to then say, well, let's not really pay attention to the very rules that I, as a politician, swear to uphold, right? And those are very clear, they're very set down, and it's part and parcel to the respect that they're obviously not affording us in the first place. They're assuming they can control us and have power over us. And then they're also assuming, because they already assume they can have power over us, they're already assuming that they can expand that power over us by going beyond even what the Constitution claims for power in the U.S. government. And then there's finally that consequential aspect of it, which is the definition of worth. That leads to them defining for you what is worth something to you. And everything breaks down in the long run and living standards drop. So the whole system doesn't work.
Yeah, the Constitution is deliberately nebulous, purposefully vague. I'm trying to get this across to people because it's an important point. Lawyers wrote the Constitution, men like Hamilton and Madison and all these people. They were very careful with their word choice. They didn't just flippantly choose a word. So when they included things like necessary and proper and general welfare, they understood exactly what those words meant, meaning they mean nothing. They are subject to interpretation. Your opinion and my opinion about what constitutes the general welfare will vary. So it gave them the opportunity, built into the Constitution, to make the Constitution mean whatever somebody says it means.
Right.
And that's why we have, there are no fixed standards, no lines that cannot be crossed. There were some in the Bill of Rights. Most of the language of the Bill of Rights is pretty clear. And even that hasn't mattered. Read the Fourth Amendment. It straightforwardly says that, no searches and seizures absent probable cause, specific probable cause, or a warrant issued by a judge. And yet we're constantly subjected to searches and seizures, aren't we? Without any probable cause or a warrant. Try to get on an airplane. You go out for a drive in your car and you get stopped at a sobriety or a safety checkpoint. See what happens. These are obvious, self-evident violations of the Fourth Amendment. It doesn't matter. And I think it's the fact that everybody understands this, that it doesn't matter. We live in a might makes right type of system right now. And it's become so blatant and so apparent. And Trump is simply the logical byproduct, of this dead end road that we've been driving on for a long time.
Oh, yeah, well stated. Yeah, I was talking about this last night, Eric. Just look at the whole sanctions nonsense. The term, first of all, isn't in the Constitution. They can apply tariffs. Sanctions. What the heck does that even mean? Well, obviously, what it means is you're taking somebody's property without due process. You're stealing somebody's stuff, whether it's government stuff or it's somebody from another country and they're just doing business here, or it's a Russian with a yacht, and you're going to take their stuff. You're not going to afford them any due process. You're not even going to charge them with a crime. You're going to find them guilty and take their stuff, contrary to half the Bill of Rights. And they just blithely use the term, well, we're applying sanctions, and people on television argue over the efficacy or the wisdom of the sanctions. How about the ethics of the sanctions or the anti-constitutional nature of it? It's so obvious. It's so clear. You can't deny this stuff. But
how about the implications of it? This is one of the frustrating things to me, because people are thoughtless. They don't consider it. If the government can impose sanctions on A, then it can impose sanctions on B, which means you and me.
Right. Yeah.
What's to prevent them from doing that? If they violate anybody's property rights, then nobody's property rights are secure.
Eric, I want to just turn to one thing here and show you this character down in Washington who's going to be one of the lead people to make sure that, none of us are at all, causing trouble for Israel. So this is the man, Jared Moskowitz, and I'll bring your volume down. Here we go with him.
What has been your impression of this conversation amongst your colleagues about the differences between offensive and defensive aid to Israel, and potentially choosing to condition aid to Israel based on them following international law?
There's been a debate up here for a long period of time on offensive weapons, okay? And I think that debate is appropriate. I don't have a problem with that. It's interesting that the debate now is going on to defensive weapons, because for the longest time, the folks that were against offensive weapons said, but we're for protecting civilians. And that's why we're for continue.
So I'm just going to stop it there, Eric, because that disgusts me. And they don't understand that the offense defense argument is non-starting, and that the offense is against us. They don't even understand it. They don't grasp it at all. They're talking about what they're planning for us and our earnings, our slavery. That's what they're doing.
Another aspect of this too that's kind of interesting to me, which is that the state of Israel is widely acknowledged to possess something like 200 nuclear weapons. Now, this is a country, a state that's the size of Delaware, something like that.
Yeah.
Very, very small territory, relatively speaking. 200 nuclear weapons. I wouldn't characterize that as defensive, would you?
Absolutely crazy. And again, also to get into the definition, in a way, it's translatable because that's an occupation state. I don't agree with any state whatsoever. But as far as the authenticity or validity of a state being in a certain place, the idea that anything associated with Israel can be defensive is offensive from the start. It's like saying, well, yeah, that group of pirates who came ashore and they took your house. Yeah. Well, we've been supplying those pirates with some muskets to make sure they can protect themselves against some of the people that they drove away from the house. Really? Yeah, that's defensive. Wait, do they belong there? No.
That American kids are taught, for example, to be ashamed of, to regret what was done to Native peoples, to the American Indian, the Trail of Tears, all of this sort of thing. And that's valid. What was done to them was awful. Well, what is the state of Israel doing?
Yeah.
They get a pass for that. And at the same time, we have a Holocaust memorial, I think more than one, but we have certainly got one in the capital of this country. That always struck me as rather odd since the Holocaust happened in Europe. How about they erect a monument to the Trail of Tears in Tel Aviv?
Oh, great point. Eric, let me hop over. I want to ask you another one. You have so many articles over your site, but I don't want to miss any comments. I'm gonna show the Rumble feed. I'm in the Russians. The Russians are going to show the Rumble feed. If we've missed any of your comments, everybody, feel free to like retype them in the next couple seconds, or just copy and paste and put them back up there. Let's see. We got Alien Poop Evolution says Christians are playing around with new thought and new age ideas more and more, and the AI Carl Jung garbage can be heard as they pass by. And let's see over here. Thank you, Skunk Hollow. Let's see. Eric, I heard that the sheriff here in our county will not be renewing the contract with flock cameras. Interesting. And I don't know what the story is, if you've got any information. By the way, everybody, I just want to let you know I texted Glenn Jacobs today in Tennessee because there's a story about flock. We're going to get into that. I'll show you what I've been looking at. I don't know if you heard about in Knox County, Eric, there is a dispute over the fact that it looks like the police department, the sheriff's department already started to engage in a contract with Flock before they actually should have gotten into it. I'll talk about that in a minute. But Eric, feel free to talk about anything else. There are tons of other stories on your site too.
Well, let me address that subject that was just brought up. Rocky Top's a friend of mine. We live in the same county. Anyway, I think it's great that the sheriff has apparently decided to not renew the contract. But why was there a contract to begin with? Well, because the county can seize my money and my buddy Rocky's money, and all the other people in the county are forced to hand over money. So a relative handful of people, these self-appointed supervisor people, who make the decisions, get to take our money and use it to do things like buy Flock cameras or get into bed with Flock camera so that they can fleece us.
Yeah.
Every day now, I've lived in this county for 22 years, and it used to be a pretty laid-back backwater place, and the cops drove these old Ford Crown Victorias. Remember the Crown Victorias?
Sure.
Well, all of a sudden, the cops are driving these nice, brand new $50,000 a piece Ford Explorer Interceptors, and they're constantly running radar traps, which they never used to do. They didn't have radar, if you can imagine that. The local sheriffs didn't have radar 20-something years ago when I moved here. Now they just sit there in the air-conditioned splendor of their $50,000 vehicle looking for speeding scofflaws, and it's infuriating.
Man, it's like, they're sitting behind the billboard. Boy, you're in my county now.
Right.
Let me tell you this, I do remember, and they did the same thing over here around the same time that I think it was the Obama administration started to bring in some of the military vehicles for the cities to be able to grab up, that sort of thing, to fight the drugs.
Yeah.
And let me show you this, Eric, over at my Substack, and then I want to get into a couple other quick ones over at your site as well. I want to go over here and just bring up the Flock camera story, and I got to scroll down a little bit here. Okay, economies, all right, and tariffs, and man, there's so much stuff here. Syria, I love. By the way, Eric, did you see today? I'll talk about it a little bit more. Did you see today that they pulled al-Nusra off of the terrorist list?
No, I missed that.
I know. Well, I want to show some of the really, really good times. As Van Halen would say, where have all the good times gone? Please don't forget, everybody, that even while they were on the terrorist list, John McCain was hanging out with al-Jilani, who now is the head of Syria's government, because that's exactly, the kind of people they love. They're just, they're awesome. And there you go. So that's awesome. But okay, let me get over to the Flock camera thing here. Here it is, Flock cameras. Knox County commissioners question Flock camera purchase below review threshold. So here's the story out of Knox County, everybody. And I texted Glenn about this. I'm going to see if Glenn can join me on the show sometime soon, because, he's been in the midst of this fight, just like he was in the midst of the fight stopping the masks. And Glenn's term is going to be up, I think, at the end of the year. I don't think he's going to be running again. I don't know. Knox County commissioners have raised concerns about how the sheriff's office has purchased Flock license plate reader cameras, arguing that repeated transactions just below $25,000, that review threshold, may indicate a pattern of structuring payments, according to WIVK-FM. During an August 24th meeting, Commissioner Larson J. reviewed records showing multiple payments to Flock Safety totaling, get this, $24,990, just $10 under the $25,000 threshold that would trigger review by the Knox County Mayor's office. That would be Glenn Jacobs' office. Jay also noted several $12,500 purchase pairs, which, if combined, could have crossed the threshold. He said the repeated just under purchases were a red flag and suggested, whether intentional or not, the pattern warranted scrutiny. Knox County has about 143 active, costing over $2 million since the program began. Well, Eric, we've spoken about this before, and I got to say, last night, Karen Carpenter on her show, and you know Karen, she started her show, the Surreal Surroundings show, on Rumble and on YouTube, and she had our friend Handy, who's a paramedic EMT, on, and he was talking about the monitors inside the ambulances now, just like you've been discussing with those cameras.
Yep.
And, you know, the eyes are, you know, if you're looking, you're trying to, he says, hey, we're driving fast. We're going up on the curb to get around people. We can't have this stuff getting in our way. And you've run into this as well. This technological fascist government payoff scheme thing, it seems like more people are becoming aware of it, but it almost seems like that classic line from Grandma from Star Wars where Princess Leia said, the firmer you clutch your fingers, the more star systems will slip through your fingers, the firmer you grip. And I think in a way, the firmer that we're trying to grip things and get a handle of this thing, the more often there are still going to be more that pop through because the politicians have incentives to give money to these corporate fascist groups. I think maybe some monitoring will sort of stop some of this stuff. What do you think?
Well, obviously there's big money and there's big control in this. That's what it's fundamentally all about. We have had this sort of petty luxury of being able to get away with things. You know, there are all these ridiculous little rules, the minutia of the state. Don't make a U-turn, it's illegal. Don't make a right on red, buckle up for safety. You know, most of the time we can get away with these things because there are only so many cops relative to however many there are of us, right?
Yeah.
Well, what they're trying to erect is this awful system, an East German busybody system where they know everything that you do all the time. And the minute you step out of line at any time, they're gonna ding you, mulct you, punish you, whatever it is that they're going to do to you. And the absolute, forgive me, imbeciles who don't see this, who think, oh, it's just a crime fighting tool, they're going to get the bad guys. They don't seem to understand the bad guys are in control of this.
Exactly.
And the actual criminals are going to be the incidental ones. Just like in 1984, Orwell wrote about this. You had the political criminals, and then you had the other criminals, the ones who are actually criminals that the state really didn't even care about. It was the political criminals that they cared about the most. You can imagine, let's say that there's, you don't like flock cameras, so you want to go to the town hall to express your dislike of that. They know you're there. They know you were there. They know every movement that you made. This is a hard line that cannot be crossed. It's got to be stopped. And I have a feeling that it is something that actually may represent a kind of Lexington and Concord moment for this country. I do think people have had it up to here with this stuff.
Oh, it would be great.
And looking at that awful little soy boy, Garrett Langley, the guy who's in charge of Flock, and even the terminology that they use, flock. Yeah. I mean, it's like a flock of sheep. They think there are shepherds. They think that we're animals to be herded by them.
Corral. Yep, put them in the corral. Exactly. And the mentality of these people, it's so offensive. And well, I won't even go into it. I want to talk about one other piece that you've got. And Eric, actually, you take the pick, Eric. I'm going to go to the website. We got the gas tax report from yesterday.
I think the tire one is the more important one because that's going to
come for your tires.
National repercussions for that. And this is breaking news. The California regulatory apparatus has decreed that when people go to buy replacement tires for their vehicles, they're going to have to get OE, original equipment spec tires that have the same rolling resistance. Now, let me give you some background. Vehicle manufacturers, when they build a car, they have to deal with regulatory compliance stuff, particularly having to do with gas mileage requirements and also emissions requirements. So they look for ways to eke out these fractional increases in fuel efficiency and fractional reductions per car via whatever means that they can use to do that. The automated stop-start system is an example of a compliance technology. These 10-speed transmissions with 3 overdrives, another example. Well, they use very low rolling resistance tires for the same purpose. So you buy the car, okay, and then you need new tires a couple of years down the road. Maybe you want a tire that's got a more aggressive tread pattern because maybe you want better grip in bad weather.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So they want to take that choice away from you. The other choice that they want to take away, and this is something that's not much discussed with regard to this issue, is there are cheaper alternatives than OE spec tires. They're made by, say, Korean manufacturers, Hankook. So maybe people want to save some money on their replacement tire. So they get on Tire Rack or something and they buy a Korean-made tire that costs $100 for a tire as opposed to the OE spec tire that costs $175. They want to take that away, and they want to force you to buy the more expensive OE spec tire, and they have the effrontery to say, well, you'll be saving money on gas. If you were, why wouldn't people do it on their own? It makes absolutely no sense. It's whenever you hear that, it's axiomatic, like in math, axiomatic. That they are actually going to take money and take liberty away from you. Now, the thing is, it's not just California, unfortunately. It's going to start to metastasize and spread to other states. And once a couple of other big states get on board with this, what do you suppose the tire manufacturers are going to do? They're going to say, well, the heck with it. We're going to stop making the tires that are non-compliant, that we know we're not going to be allowed to sell. Right. And the government's going to enforce this by, most tires have codes stamped onto their sidewall that tell you things like when it was manufactured and so on. Well, the same thing, they'll put a stamp on it. So when you go in for your mandatory government safety inspection or emissions inspection, now they're going to look at your tires, and if your tires aren't compliant, then they won't give you the inspection seal of approval or the emission seal of approval. Are
they going to be able to stop this, or is this?
It's already happened. It's a done deal in California. So now it's just a question of whether, say, Washington and Oregon, which are controlled by these crazy blue leftist people, and who have a great hostility toward the personal car. For us, not for them. That's an important point to make. This is fundamentally an attack on the bourgeois, on the middle classes, the working classes. They don't want us owning and driving cars. That's why they're making them so expensive for people to buy and to keep. And this is part and parcel of that.
I remember years ago, Eric, as Gene Shaheen was the governor, they had people coming to New Hampshire to try to discuss the best form of tax to impose on New Hampshire citizens. And there was a meeting up at Dartmouth, and I raised my hand and I was like, well, since valuation is subjective and utility on the margins is something only we can measure, how is it that you can figure out for everybody else what the best form of taxation of taking their money is? Doesn't that sort of imply a lack of ethics? And the whole room just went silent. It was like 200 people, and you could hear a pin drop. They were like, we don't like this guy, because they were trying to push for an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. That's what they were trying to do.
This is exactly the right thing to do, though, is to call it out.
Yeah.
Not let it pass, to demand that they define their terms, as Ayn Rand used to put it. I learned that from her. To make sure you understand what's being talked about, and to not let them manipulate the conversation by talking about things that are not actually what's being discussed.
Yes. Burn that extra mental and moral fuel. Get it out there and be that strong about it. And take on this California Energy Committee chair, David, what's his name? David Hochschild. Mm-hmm. And he says, today we're proud to approve the nation's first replacement tire efficiency standards. So again, they will decide for you. It's just astounding. And it's the same thing with the gas efficiency standards that they have had since the 70s. Well, we'll decide for you. It's like, well, what if I want to not conform to what you're saying? What if, as you and I have discussed, what if your recommendations are going to bring out outcomes that themselves could be dangerous for people? What happens then? What happens if people try to find ways to skirt these things or go a little longer or do something else? What happens when, for example, the auto manufacturers have to raise their CAFE standards so they make a lot more lighter cars right after, say, a 1979, 1980 application of a new CAFE standard, and people get in accidents in lighter cars, more people die? What if they have, other types of things that they're applying for people's so-called safety, and people think they're safer, so they drive more recklessly, whatever it might be. All these things, this car kill switch that they're going to apply, they're deciding for all of us. And
there's a superciliousness to it. There's a contemptuous aspect to it. These people somehow think that they know everything, and they're going to make sure that we do whatever it is they think is best for us. Of course, it's also combined with grotesque hypocrisy. The same people who are imposing these, and I believe that they're deliberately punitive things on average people, they themselves don't have to bear the consequences of it. Right. I don't expect Donald Trump, for example, to be tooling around in a motorcade of Toyota Priuses. He just had the taxpayers, you and me, buy 250 6.2 liter V8 powered Cadillac Escalades that get 12 miles per gallon.
Amazing.
That's the way and people are seeing this now. It's so in your face. They don't even try to hide it anymore. You and I can remember when Jimmy Carter at least wore a sweater and talked about energy conservation.
Turn the thermostat down.
But I mean, to his credit, it may even have been authentic, but at least he went through the motions of acting like he himself was experiencing some of the negative consequences of these policy choices. But instead, we've literally got something like that scene in 1984 where the animals are looking through the kitchen window and they can see the pigs, feasting at the farmer's table with the farmer.
Oh, you mean Animal Farm? Animal Farm,
excuse me.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly it. They have utter contempt, and they're not even afraid. That's a great point. Over at Rumble, I want to mention, Eric, Jason Barker has a comment. And Jason, thank you so much. The summer drive continues. Jason, thank you, man. Jason contributed $20, everybody, over at Rumble, which is just awesome. So nice. Yeah, and he said this, Eric. He said they would save more on efficiency by ditching the weight from all the mandated safety stuff. Just from weight of the equipment alone would also make cars.
A couple of months ago, I had an opportunity to test drive and review the current Toyota Prius. And, in preparing to write about it, I looked through the specs and I found out something fascinating, as Mr. Spock would say. So this is a Prius hybrid. So, ostensibly it's focused on efficiency uber alles, right? Yeah. It comes with 17-inch wheels, optional 19-inch wheels. If you get the optional 19-inch wheels, it drops the gas mileage by 3 or 4 miles per gallon. Now, implicit in that, imagine if you went down to 15s or 14s, which is what an economy car should have.
Right.
Probably instead of averaging 55 miles per gallon, I think it would probably average 62.
Yeah.
The stupidity of having the aesthetics of rims, it's one of the most pernicious trims, along with barbed wire tattoos. Rims, everybody's got to have a rim on their vehicle now. I had a Land Rover last week with 23-inch rims, and you can only imagine the rolling resistance of 23-inch and the weight, the stupidity.
Absolutely. Boy, oh boy. You remind me when my brother was a kid. He was in the Cub Scouts, and they had the soapbox derby races. Where the kids build their little cars. Yeah, and all the little tweaks that you can make for the engineering of those things to increase their ability to be able to go down a ramp more efficiently, even where the weight is loaded, to help it go down. These are, obviously in your profession, you encounter these things, you've learned these things, you've been a gearhead for most of your life. And so here's the deal. Even if the government were to hire you to say, well, he's been a gearhead most of his life, now we're bringing Eric Peters in, you wouldn't take the job. You'd be like, no, let people decide for themselves.
Right. It's just so simple. Get the government out of the way. Let vehicle manufacturers come up with ideas and offer them to people who are free to buy them or not. That's how it used to work.
Yeah.
My dad, in our own lifetime, when we were kids, people were still free to buy Volkswagen Beetles that weighed 1,600 pounds that were basic, simple, and cheap. Now, understand a lot of people might not want to drive, a crude, basic little car, but there are people who would. Why not? Why shouldn't people be allowed to buy a car like that if they want to? I mean, the fact that you say that aloud, are you kidding me? No wonder nobody says it's a free country. You never hear that anymore. With good reasons.
No, it's and again, it brings us back to the piece that you wrote that we opened in the conversation with, Eric. Again, when I get the publishing company started, I don't know whether we've spoken about this or not, but if you ever write fiction with these sort of messages in there, I want to do an anthology that has short fiction that has some of these things in there. I also want to note, Jason is talking about his diesel VW diesel Rabbit. And boy, those things were great. The VW Diesel Rabbit, 50 plus miles a gallon, weighed a third or less than the small new cars. So true, so true. Those things were great. The VW Rabbits
without an overdrive transmission, with very very crude technology. This was like in the early '80s. The vehicle that he's talking about, I think, came out in '79, and there was a pickup version of it also.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a guy across the street had one of those. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
So, with the technology that's available today, with overdrive and various other things, you could absolutely have vehicles that got 65, 70 miles per gallon that didn't need to be hybrids, with all the additional hardware and cost involved in adding that additional element to the powertrain.
The other thing too, Eric, when I'm thinking about costs, expenses, things like that, and you're looking at a lot of these things and checking things out for people and giving suggestions and stuff. I want to go back a little bit to the United States making these decisions about what we can buy, what we can't buy regarding the tariff thing. So this is where I want to go back to, Eric, just on the screen from the Cato Institute. They've been doing Scott Lincecum, and I contacted them, but I haven't heard back because I wanted to get Scott on the show. This is a great example of people making decisions for us about what is okay to buy or not. He said the narrative that tariffs are fueling America's manufacturing surge doesn't hold up. Hard data show the upswing is driven by non-tariff forces, and factories would likely be doing even better without the tariffs, explains Cato's Scott Lincecum. So you see machinery, business equipment, and things like that. And we've got 2025, a lot of these different types of things. Now, and some of these are going down, of course, chemicals going down, some of these are going down. But the idea that making it harder to make something is going to be good for somebody else is such an affront to peace that I think that's a great way to end it. If people just remember that, your life is your own. And I thought your piece was just great, man. It was so good. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I guess we better get going. I know you got to get up early. I want to remind people they can go over to your site, check it out, and again, see all of the great articles that are there. So many of them. The Happy Slave one we started, that was a great one. Losers All is another one. We'll have to talk about that again later. Maybe I'll bring that up tomorrow on my own, Eric. I don't know. But also head and go to the website, donate if you can. That would be awesome. And Eric Peters Auto's gear, get it. And if I can ask one or two people if they will go and do something like that, I will make my night. I'll be a happy as a clam. I don't know what that means.
I guess clams are happy. How could we tell?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm a mollusk, I guess. Thanks, dude, and have a great night. Give my regards to all the felines there too, brother. I'll be saying.
I want to sleep right here to my left. You can't see her because the room's getting dark, but she's right here.
Oh, cool, man. All right, cool. All right, well, have a good one, dude. Thank you again. It's just great. I appreciated being able to be in touch today. I won't tell people some of the funny stuff you send. It's not offensive in any way. It's just funny. It's great. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Okie doke.
All right.